If you like Storytime vibes, hit subscribe and let's dive in together.
I never thought one cruel sentence could set fire to everything I had built with my husband. It wasn't supposed to be more than a silly fight, the kind couples forget after a night's sleep. But that evening in the kitchen, with dishes stacked in the sink and the harsh smell of burnt garlic filling the air, I crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Daniel had forgotten the groceries again. I was exhausted, frustrated, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. He snapped back, his tone just as bitter, and within seconds words were flying across the room like knives. Then I said it, the sentence that turned my marriage into ash. "Maybe if you were half the man you pretend to be," I hissed, "you'd actually satisfy me for once." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. His face froze, his jaw tightened. And his eyes. God, I will never forget the way his eyes darkened that moment. Wounded, furious, burning. He didn't yell, didn't throw anything. He simply stared at me like a stranger, then turned and walked away. I thought he would cool down, that we would laugh about it tomorrow. Couples fight. Words slip out in anger, don't they? But I was wrong. The storm never passed. The next days were colder than winter. He still came home, still sat at the dinner table, still lay down in the same bed. But everything felt lifeless. His answers to my questions were clipped and empty. When I tried to meet his gaze, he looked past me as though I wasn't there. And at night, when I reached for him, his body stiffened like I was poison. Sometimes he turned away. Other times he just lay flat, still as a corpse, a wall between us. I tried everything. I cooked his favorite meals. I put on the dresses he once adored. I wrote little notes and slipped them into his work bag. I whispered apologies until my throat was raw. Nothing worked. It was as though I had stabbed something vital in him and the wound refused to heal. One night, sobbing with desperation, I clutched his arm. "Daniel, I didn't mean it. I was angry. Please, forgive me." For the first time in weeks, he truly looked at me. His eyes locked on mine, but there was no softness left. Only steel. "You don't get it," he said quietly. "You took the most vulnerable part of me, the trust I gave you, and you turned it into a weapon. Do you think an apology erases that?" His words sliced deeper than any knife. I collapsed in tears, begging him to understand. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something had broken that night. Something fragile and sacred. And no matter how many tears I shed, no matter how many times I said sorry, I would never be able to put it back together again. Weeks turned into months, and I watched my husband slowly transform into someone I didn't recognize. He used to linger in the kitchen while I cooked, teasing me with silly jokes. Now he spent long hours at the gym or stayed late at the office. He claimed he was busy, but the truth lingered in his cold tone. He just didn't want to be near me. At first, I thought it was grief, that maybe with enough time, he would soften. But then I started to notice the patterns. He guarded his phone like it was gold. His screen always faced down on the table. When I walked into the room, he'd slip it into his pocket with practiced ease. The man who once shared every password with me now had walls taller than a fortress. The distance between us wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical. He stopped reaching for me in bed, stopped touching me altogether. Nights felt like sleeping next to a ghost. I was desperate to pull him back, to remind him of what we had. But the more I tried, the further he drifted away. Then came the dinner party. Friends gathered, wine flowed, laughter echoed around the table. Someone joked about the silly things couples say during fights. "What's the worst thing you two ever said to each other?" a friend teased. My heart froze. I prayed he wouldn't bring it up, prayed he'd laugh it off. Daniel looked at me, eyes sharp, lips curved in a smile that wasn't really a smile. "Words cut deepest when they're meant to," he said. The table chuckled, unaware of the dagger in his voice, but I felt it pierce me. Later, at home, I asked him why he said that. His reply was calm, chilling. "Because I'll never forget, and I'll never look at you the same again." Those words haunted me. They replayed in my head every morning and every night. I knew I had lost him, but I refused to admit it. Not until the evidence became undeniable. It started small. A faint whiff of perfume on his shirt. Something floral, not mine. A credit card bill with dinners I never attended. Excuses that grew thinner by the day. One evening, he came home late, smelling of wine and cologne, his shirt slightly rumpled. I asked where he'd been. "Just work," he said flatly, brushing past me. But I wasn't blind, I wasn't stupid. I knew the signs. My cruel words had wounded him, yes. But now, I suspected, he was finding comfort in someone else's arms. That thought tore me apart. The guilt of my mistake mixed with the rage of his betrayal, creating a storm inside me. I had humiliated him once, and he would never forgive me. But if he was cheating, if he had already replaced me, then he wasn't just a victim anymore. He was making a choice to destroy what was left of us. And that realization sparked something in me. A cold determination. If he thought I would crumble in silence while he slipped away, he was wrong. Dead wrong. The night I decided to uncover the truth, I felt strangely calm. I had lived in limbo for too long, half guilty, half suspicious, but no more. I needed answers, and I was ready for whatever I found. I started small, checking his car mileage against his late nights at work, reviewing the credit card bills he thought I never saw. Then I followed him one evening. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I tailed him across town. He didn't go to the office. He didn't go to the gym. He pulled into a quiet restaurant, dimly lit, intimate. And then she appeared. A woman with glossy hair, a laugh too familiar, sliding into the booth across from him. I watched as he leaned in close, his hand brushing hers across the table. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. It was true. The man who once promised me forever was now giving pieces of himself to someone else. I could have stormed in that moment, screamed, shattered glasses, made a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I turned the key in my ignition and drove home, my tears blinding the road. Because if Daniel thought he held all the power, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Over the next weeks, I prepared. Quietly, carefully. I copied documents, moved money into an account under my name, and gathered proof of his affair. Screenshots, receipts, photos. The arsenal of a woman who had been pushed too far. Then, one evening, I set the trap. I invited him to dinner at home. Candles lit, table set, his favorite wine uncorked. He arrived, surprised by the effort. For the first time in months, he smiled. He thought I was surrendering. We ate. We talked. Superficial. Polite. Then I slid a small folder across the table. "Open it," I said. His smile faltered. Inside were the photos, the receipts, every lie neatly documented. His face drained of color. "You thought I'd never know," I said softly. "But I do. I know everything." He tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Save it. You shattered us long before she walked in. I may have hurt you with words, but you chose betrayal. And that choice has consequences." The next weeks were a blur of lawyers, signatures, and whispered gossip among friends. He begged me to reconsider, to keep it quiet. But I didn't. I let the truth out. Slowly, people saw him for who he was, not a victim, but a man who retaliated with betrayal. When the divorce was finalized, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not even anger, just peace. Because I had survived the storm and I had learned the hardest lesson of all: love cannot survive without respect. Words can wound, yes, they can scar, but betrayal kills. And as I walked out of that courthouse, papers in hand, I promised myself this: never again would I give someone the power to destroy me with either.